New Hampshire. Previous to that, I had a farm in Salisbury, New Hampshire, which is only about 8 miles away. I was there from 1981 until 1996. What can I say? My background as far as gardening and farming goes is I never did much gardening when I was a kid. I grew up in Concord. I didn't even know what a garden looked like really until the late 70s when I was living in Montana in a house I built on the back of a truck because I was ski bumming at the time. And I saw a guy had a garden, and I saw things. I think it was a broccoli plant, and I had no idea what it was. That's when I realized that even though I had pretty strong survival skills, I didn't have a clue about how to grow food. So I decided that because out west they still shoot people over water, I was going to come back east and learn how to garden. So, long story short, that was in 77, 76, 77. In 81, I bought 42 acres of land in Salisbury and started building a farm. We started out, I got married that year with a woman that had been traveling with me for the last 7 years, living in my truck. We started, as most people do, in raised beds. We started gardening, and then after a few years, we realized that we were growing way more food than we could possibly eat, can, or give away. So we came up with this novel concept of trying to sell it. Well, long story short, we went from growing 1,800 square feet of raised beds to doing 4 acres of vegetables. I called it my quantum leap. We went from a small garden to a 2-acre vegetable operation in 1 year. I first heard about NOFA, New Hampshire in 1977. A good friend of mine told me about this group of organic farmers or gardeners that were getting together. We went to a board meeting at, at that point, the NOFA office was in what's currently called the Project C little building on Clinton Street. We had an office there for years. And I met a bunch of people that were pretty heavy hitters at the time. A lot of them were already gardening commercially or growing very successfully. And I remember being a little overwhelmed because at this point we were just barely having a garden for the first time and didn't really even know how to grow stuff. But we became members and we paid our dues and did all that stuff. And then when we moved to the farm in 1981, shortly thereafter, once I got sort of settled down, I've been thinking about this, and I'm pretty sure, I want to say mid-'80s is when I first was on the board, the NOFA board. And at that time, we were fairly vibrant. We had a good number of people. Things were going. I think we were still riding the initial surge of energy that comes with a new organization. And then things started slowing down in the mid-'80s and then the late 80s. A woman named Winifred Wingate was the president of NOFA at that time. I started out as, I think, the treasurer once the first time I got nabbed for an official role. And then I became vice president, and Winifred was basically grooming me to take over the reins when she decided to hang it up. I think that happened late 80s. I'm not really sure, but I'm guessing around 88, 89 is when I finally took over the reins of NOFA. At that period in time, NOFA was kind of hitting the skids. Our membership was fairly good, but there wasn't a lot of involvement on the board level. There were many times, I remember when Winifred was still president, there were times, a couple years where there were 3 people at the board meeting. There was Winifred as the president, me as the vice president, and one woman that I can't remember what her name was the secretary and treasurer. So there were 3 people running the entire organization, basically doing everything. It was a little thin, It was an all-volunteer operation. I think NOFA New Hampshire was the last NOFA chapter to have not have paid staff. We did everything on a volunteer basis. Anyway, things got better once I became president. We started pulling things together. The board, we started getting more interested people. We kind of got back on our feet, and basically we ran a pretty clean operation up until, like I said, I was the president, I believe, until 97, maybe 98. I'm not really positive exactly, when I stopped, because at that point in time I had gotten divorced and I'd moved off my farm, so I wasn't actively farming, so I didn't really feel that it was, we'll say, appropriate to have a non-farmer run in NOFA, New Hampshire. I mean, it just didn't make sense. So I bailed out. Dan Holmes, who was the gardener up at Shaker Village, took over, and after that it'll go into what I will call the modern times, and everybody else, you folks know what's going on better than I do, because since then I've kind of dropped out of direct involvement. I still went to NOFA conferences, still did a bunch of workshops, but I would say in the early 2000s I stopped doing that because of other commitments I had. Okay. From the very beginning, like I said, I didn't come in until the organization had already started. Obviously, it started 5-6 years before I even became a member. So I'm thinking that NOFA, New Hampshire was 10 years old before I became actively involved in it. I don't know what went on in those first 10 years, except that I know there was a lot of energy and a lot of people were excited about this new organization. But as far as growing it after that, the main thing that happened during, we'll say, my tenure was that we held on to NOFA, New Hampshire. It wasn't real pretty at times, but we still had a presence, and we were still able to maintain a membership and keep the organization going. We did the bulk order on a regular. That used to be our big project, with the bulk order in the spring. So that kept on going, and then once I took over the reins, we started producing a printed newsletter that went out. I don't remember. I think it went out every month for a while, or then it might have gone to every 2 months. I don't recall. That kept on growing. We never did anything like the winter conference that they're currently doing. We were never that involved with the education side. Was mostly, I don't even think we were doing any farm tours at that point. I think we were basically just an organization that was disseminating information through our newsletter and offering soil amendments and fertilizers through the bulk order. So I think those are pretty much the two things that we emphasized during my tenure. The struggles were mainly getting everything done that needed to be done to keep the organization moving. Like I said, during what I call the dark years, when there were 3 people doing all the work, we didn't get a whole lot done. We kind of just held our own. But the fact that we held our own was one of the milestones, I think, of my tenure, was the fact that we kept NOFA, New Hampshire alive, and it was able to, at least, it wasn't thriving, but it wasn't dying. So I thought we did a pretty good job just to keep it going. And then when things started getting better, everything started doing great. Not anywhere near as like it is today. You folks are doing a great job now with all kinds of things. So if I were to say one thing about a win on this situation, I would say the fact that NOFA, New Hampshire is as vibrant as it is today is probably one of the things that I can look back on and be most proud of, is the fact that we pulled it together and gave you folks an opportunity to run with it. I would say my most memorable moments probably have to be the summer conference. I loved the summer conference. We'd go there and spend this is when the conference was running 3 days. They used to run Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And it was just a hoot. You get to see all these people once a year, most of the, it's like these people would come crawling out of the woodwork from all over the Northeast, and they'd come to Hampshire College, and you'd get to hang out and just get this huge energy burst, and then we'd all go away on Sunday, and we'd all go back to crawl back to our farms and say, well, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. It had this great energy, which pretty much happens when you get anytime a group of people together that have, a common interest. You get this energy buzz out of them. So I would say those are probably the highlights. A lot of the people that I've met through NOFA are some of the finest people I've ever met. From the state organization, our particular chapter, we incrementally got better through the 90s. We started producing a bigger newsletter. It was a little more professional. You got to realize this is all pre-computer, so everything was being done. I don't know how it was being done. A guy named Tom Stars, who lived at Green Pastures Estates in Epping. He was the newsletter guru. I have no idea how he did what he did, but he was really, really good. And because of that, we were able to produce a pretty high-quality newsletter with a lot of pertinent information, not just rehashing stuff that we gleaned from other publications. We were doing a lot of original material. Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I can give you a really short answer, and the answer is the fact that NOFA has been here for 50 years is probably the most important thing. I can't think of any one thing that NOFA has done that is monumental, even though there's a bunch of them. They were involved at local level, national level with organic certification, which was a huge step. But the fact that NOFA is still here and is bigger than ever, I think, is probably the best achievement of the last 50 years. I can't think of anything specifically to say, well, I think you ought to go in this direction, because you folks right now are doing a great job. There are times that I've thought about coming down to a board meeting and just kind of sneaking in because nobody would know who I am, just checking up to make sure you guys are doing a good job. And I'm telling you, everything I've seen is just top-notch. So if I were to put down a sound bite, I would say the most important thing NOFA can do for the next 50 years is be around for the next 50 years. Now, granted, there are a few things. Water issues in the West are becoming more and more poignant this year. I think our agriculture system is on the verge of potentially breaking down in ways that people, I don't want to say the organic community is always right, but we've been screaming this for the last 40, 50 years that, you got to do things a little bit differently. And with climate change and the water issues they're having out west right now, I think people are starting to realize that the old way of doing things, I say the old way, it was only post-World War II where this new way came in. Before that, people were growing the same way we've been growing for the last 50 years. So what advice do I have for young and beginning farmers? Let's see. The main thing is don't give up. We need young blood recirculated into the system. I know when I started out, I was fortunate that there were a bunch of young people that were, I'll say, my peers, who were just starting out or had been maybe in the business for like 5 years. So they had a whole lot of knowledge that I was able to tap into. So advice to young people would be find a mentor, because the mentoring system, no matter what you're doing, is probably the best way to learn not just learn, but it's like I made a bunch of mistakes in my life. So if some young person comes up and asks me, I can hopefully save them from making those mistakes so they can go out and make their own mistakes, but at least they don't have to replicate the same ones that have already been made. Let them, it's like, why reinvent the wheel? And mentors invented the wheel a long time ago. So if you can find somebody that has some knowledge that they're willing to share, that's probably the most important thing I can find to tell people. All I can say is I'm very, very pleased at the way NOFA New Hampshire is currently being run from what I can see. They're a dynamic organization. I would guess that some of the problems we had 30 years ago are probably the same problems you're having now, but you're doing a great job of handling them. I can't say enough of how good I feel about how the whole NOFA organization is running right now.